Hello and welcome to Conversations with CardFlight. I'm Derek Webster and I'm here today with Steve Klebe, who heads business development partnerships for Google Pay team, primarily working with all the major US processors on behalf of Google. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Derek. Good to see you.
Excellent. Could we start by having you maybe share a little bit more about your specific role at Google and how you look to work with the payment processors?
Sure. So I lead our partnerships with all the payment processors. We have actually over 60 what we call PSPs broadly or collectively, which includes gateways, processors, and acquirers. We have over 60 globally that are supporting the acceptance of Google Pay. And for online, we actually needed to structure real partnerships because it required a technical work on the PSP's part to be able to accept, for their merchants to be able to accept Google Pay. Whereas for in-store acceptance of Google Pay, it was just kind of automatic. Because we're following the network standards, but the networks never created specific standards for online acceptance.
So what are some of the unique kind of assets and capabilities that Google, you have the opportunity to work with and that Google brings to the table for the payments industry?
Yeah, so Google has a lot of assets, of course. Our reason for being in the payments business is different than what most people expect it to be. We're trying to accomplish two things. One is help our end users have a more seamless experience when they're transacting, both online and offline, and then helping our merchants who advertise with us to have more success and drive additional revenue. So especially in the online and in-app world, every merchant will tell you that there is a fairly significant percentage of abandonment, especially on mobile, because a customer might be shopping on their mobile phone, but then they get to the point of checking out and it is challenged. People have to stop what they're doing. They have to pick a username and password, then they have to remember that username and password. Whereas with Google Pay, basically you're logged in almost all the time. And so you can just click and pay.
So clearly Google has many assets you're bringing to the table, many of which are household names and familiar to all of us.
Right. The brand name is also an asset, obviously. Right.
Sure.
Right.
But you have a partnerships role. So
Yes.
where and how do you seek partners in this industry?
So interestingly enough, we partner with everybody. Because our motivation is simply enabling the end user and helping our merchants drive incremental revenue, and we don't have a direct revenue goal, we can be everybody's friend, so to speak. So we have, within our partnerships team, we have a fairly substantial global partnerships team. We cover every aspect of the ecosystem, and the whole thing is trying to make it a seamless transaction, which really is in everybody's, in the ecosystem's best interests.
Got it. And obviously, we talked earlier about your background, and you've had many roles and been in this industry for a long time. Can you talk about the recent changes? Like, how has this industry changed in your eyes over the past 3 or 5 years?
Well, I'd say the last 9-12 months have been pretty amazing and crazy.
What specifically?
Well, all the mergers and acquisitions. I've been in payments for 40 years. There have been periods where, quite frankly, the payments industry has been pretty boring. Now is not one of them.
The opposite of that.
Yeah, it's just the opposite of that. So you have the new regulations that are happening, GDPR, PSD2. You have the open banking initiatives in general. So Google launched just shy of 2 years ago. We launched a service that went by a different brand name originally in India, called TEZ, T-E-Z. It's now been rebranded Google Pay India. And in less than 2 years, we have roughly 70 million monthly active users. We've done a great job, but also the stars aligned. The government in India mandated open banking and most importantly, a unified authentication scheme. And I think it will come to the U.S. market, in due course. It is interesting, by the way, to note that At one time, the U.S. led in payment innovation.
Yep.
And I would say that the last 20 or 30 years, the U.S. has actually lagged. And you see what goes on with M-Pesa in Africa. Now, with things like, it's called UPI in India, Universal Payment Interface. And as a result of those initiatives, you see that the U.S. is actually lagging.
Yep.
So hopefully that'll turn around.
Got it. There's obviously a lot of change happening in the industry. Is there a single trend that you're paying the most attention to right now?
I'd say the number one single phenomenon that is happening, not so much in the U.S. yet, but open banking. And I think the examples of the success of those initiatives elsewhere compelled the Fed recently to make an announcement that they are going to put forth a standard for open banking, I think called faster payments, if I'm not mistaken. And hopefully, that will, then create the environment in the U.S. market to offer that as well.
So final question.
Sure.
If you could change one thing about our industry, what would it be? If you could wave a magic wand.
Yeah, if I could change one thing in the industry, I would say there's still too much friction for merchants because of the inconsistency of the front-end interfaces that exist in the market. There was an attempt by the what's called the W3C for online transactions. It was called Payment Request API. And Google was a very active participant in that standard. And at least the concept was for online that this was a framework. This would be a common approach for all payment companies could then build to that standard. And all merchants would need to do is make sure that they supported Payment Request API. The payment processors would make sure that they supported it. And then it would free the market to let good ideas, new payment methods just sort of come and go.
As long as everyone adopts the new standard.
Well, but that was the challenge. And unfortunately, quite frankly, the fact of the matter is the industry stuck its head in the sand and decided that they preferred their various proprietary approaches because they didn't want to be commoditized. And I can understand some of that. But as a result of that, now every time somebody comes to market with a new payment method, the merchant has to do this big, complicated assessment and, ROI analysis. So I would say that's unfortunate because it's sort of stifling, innovation of the things that really matter. Your API being different than my API shouldn't be like, the major impediment in the marketplace.
Well, Steve Klebe from the business development team at Google Pay, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Derek.
And thank you for watching. This has been Conversations with CardFlight. And for more great conversations with CardFlight, be sure to follow us on YouTube, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Thank you.